In all my years of teaching people, there's something subtle that I've noticed. People don't usually lose happiness because their life is terrible. They lose it because their life is full and there's no space anywhere. Full schedules, full minds, full emotional plates. And slowly, almost without even noticing, they start living in reaction mode. So they're responding all day long to people, to problems, to thoughts. And by the end of the day, they feel strangely depleted. Not devastated, not, really upset, but just kind of worn down. And the interesting thing is that most people assume that the solution is more effort. I'll try harder, I'll be more disciplined, I'll fix my mindset, I'll change up my routine. But effort isn't usually what's missing. Space is. And when there's no space, happiness doesn't have much room to exist. So let me say this up front because it matters. You don't need a new life. You don't need to overhaul everything to be happy. And you definitely don't need to become a different version of yourself. What you're missing is so much smaller than that and much easier to overlook. But before I tell you what it is, I want to talk about why so many well-intentioned happiness practices that I see being taught all over the internet don't stick. You see, what people do is they try morning routines, they try positive reinforcement, they try affirmations, and sometimes they work, but briefly. And then what happens is that life speeds up again. And when your life speeds up, those practices are the first things to go, which tells us something important. The problem isn't that people don't care about happiness, they do. But the problem is that most practices that people teach on how to be happier don't survive real life. Because what they require is ideal conditions. They require time, energy, motivation. And often they're things that our mind doesn't actually believe. And so when our mind's not believing it, it's different for it to stick. And real life doesn't usually provide these things. So what actually survives real life? They're the things that don't ask much of you. The things that fit inside your existing day. And that's where I want to take you in this conversation. Because if there's one thing that you've learned from me, is that happiness doesn't come from outside of ourselves. It is internal, and it is a series of habits that can change our happiness levels. So the most powerful happiness habits don't look impressive. They actually look almost insignificant, and that's why most people miss them. You see, most of us are moving through our days incredibly fast. We're making fast decisions. We're giving fast replies. Someone says something, a message arrives, a thought appears, and we're already responding before we've even registered what's happening. And that speed that I'm seeing more and more of as the years go by has absolutely become normalized. But it's not normal. And it comes at a cost. Because when everything happens quickly, nothing's processed. So our emotions don't land and our thoughts don't complete. And your nervous system doesn't get a chance to settle. You're just moving. And when that movement becomes your default, it is much harder to access happiness. Not because it's gone, but actually because there's no real room for it. I talked to one of my students once who said she was an executive in a law firm, and she said, I feel like my life is one long response. Emails, messages, her family, her work. And she said she never felt truly present anywhere. She said, I just feel like I'm always constantly answering something. And when we look closer, nothing dramatic was wrong. But there was no pause anywhere in her day. No moment when she wasn't reacting to something external or internal. And that's how we see clearly what's missing. In this instant, it's not a new habit, but it's a gap, a small gap between what happens and what we do next. So this is where things get interesting, because most of our stress doesn't come from events. Most of our stress comes from how we respond to them, how we react to these events, the tone we use, the thought that rises up in our mind and we chase after it, the assumptions we make, the story that we tell ourselves. And we make those moves very quickly, so quickly that they feel automatic. But automatic doesn't mean inevitable. It just means unexamined. So here's another example. Someone says something mildly irritating. It's not enough to cause a fight, but it's just enough to make your chest get really tight. So the reaction is instant. And the reaction might be a comment or a look, or you withdraw. And the moment passes, but the feeling doesn't. It follows you. Not because you're sensitive or reactive. It's because there was no space for choice. Now here's the important part. I'm not talking about being calm all the time. I'm not talking about saying the perfect thing. I'm not talking about being endlessly patient. I'm talking about introducing one small interruption into the speed of your day. And this is where most people expect something big. So they think the solution must be dramatic, but the opposite's true. The smaller it is in this situation, the more powerful it becomes, because you'll actually do it. So here it is. One habit that quietly helps to build our happiness. This is it. One intentional pause per day before you react. Not all day, not every moment, just once. Before a reply, before you make a decision, before you have one of those reactions that feels completely familiar. That's it. So the pause can be a breath. The pause might be you just taking a second. The pause might be physically shifting in your body. It doesn't matter what it looks like. What matters is that it exists. Because the pause changes your relationship with yourself. So it tells your nervous system, we don't have to rush. So it creates choice. And choice is where happiness lives. So most people think happiness is a feeling, but it's actually not. It's a capacity. And one of the things that it's a capacity of is to respond rather than react. To notice rather than let things escalate. To make a choice rather than default. And that capacity is built in moments like this. So this woman that I was working with, who said that she felt like she was constantly answering things, I taught her to choose her pause before she replied to emails. Just one breath before she hit send. That was the habit, nothing else. And over time she noticed something surprising. Not that she became calmer, but her days felt less combative, less charged, less draining. She still had the same job, she still had the same family, she still had the same inbox, she still had the same responsibilities, but she wasn't constantly in reaction mode. That's how happiness builds, not by fixing life, but by creating space inside it. This is why small beats dramatic, because dramatic change always, almost always collapses under pressure. That's why when I teach you to work with your happiness levels, I'm really looking at small habits. Small habits survive. They slip into the cracks of real life. And those cracks are where change actually happens. And so if you're wondering where this pause would matter most for you, where you tend to react, where things escalate, where you lose energy, come to MoniqueRhodes.com, do the happiness quiz. This will help you see those patterns. It's not about judgment, it's about clarity. So think of it as a way to see where one small pause would make the biggest difference. So let me leave you with this. You don't need to be happier all day. You don't have to get everything right. You need moments of space, and space starts with one pause. That's enough. And that is a powerful habit to help you with your happiness. As always, be kind, take care, go gently in the world.